Let me tell you something straight. The biggest conversation happening in your life right now is the one nobody else can hear. It's the voice in your head. And most of you, you're losing that conversation every single day. You wake up and say, I'm tired. You hit a problem and say, I can't do this. You fail once and say, maybe I'm not good enough. And then you wonder why nothing changes. Listen, if you talk to your best friend the way you talk to yourself, you wouldn't have that friend anymore. So here's the game. For the next 21 days, you're going to flip the script, not with fake positivity, not with delusion, with intentional, disciplined self-talk. When something goes wrong, you don't say, I'm a failure. You say, I'm learning. When you feel behind, you don't say, I'm too late. You say, I'm on my timeline. When things get hard, and you don't say, why me? You say, this is where growth happens. This isn't fluff. This is psychology. This is behavior change. Your brain is listening to you all day. It's taking notes. It's building patterns. So if you feed it doubt, it gives you hesitation. If you feed it belief, it gives you action. And let me be very clear, this isn't about becoming soft. This is about becoming dangerously self-aware and accountable. You still call yourself out. You still push yourself. But you do it with respect, not destruction. Because beating yourself up doesn't make you better. It just makes you tired. For 21 days, I want you to do 3 things. First, catch the negative thought. Don't ignore it. Don't pretend it's not there. Notice it. Second, replace it with something productive, not fake. Productive. Third, act anyway. Because confidence doesn't come before action, it comes from it. And here's the truth nobody wants to hear. 21 days won't magically fix your life. But it will do something powerful. It will prove to you that you're in control. That voice in your head, it's not your enemy unless you train it to be. So train it. Discipline it. Build it into something that pushes you forward instead of holding you back. Because once you win the conversation with yourself, you start winning everywhere else. Now go do it, not for motivation, not for hype, but because you're done being the reason you're stuck. Self-talk shapes identity more than most people realize, because the voice you hear the most is your own. Every single day, from the moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep, you are constantly narrating your life to yourself. That narration is not neutral. It is either building you or breaking you. When you repeatedly tell yourself that you are not good enough, not smart enough, or not capable, your brain starts accepting that as truth. Over time, those thoughts stop feeling like opinions and start feeling like facts. That is how identity is formed, not in one big moment, but in thousands of small, repeated internal statements. The mind is wired to believe what it hears often. This connects directly to the concept of neuroplasticity, which explains how your brain changes based on repeated thoughts and experiences. If your internal dialogue is consistently negative, your brain strengthens those pathways, making negativity your default mode. On the other hand, if you intentionally shift yourself, talk toward constructive, empowering language, you begin to rewire those pathways. You are not pretending, you are training your brain to operate differently. Identity is not something fixed or permanent. It is flexible and constantly evolving based on what you feed it. When you say, I am disciplined, and then follow that with action, you reinforce that identity. When you say, I always quit, and repeat that narrative, you reinforce a completely different version of yourself. The danger is that many people are unconsciously reinforcing identities they don't actually want. They are practicing failure in their own minds before they even take action in the real world. This is why awareness is the first step. You have to start listening to how you talk to yourself. Not occasionally, but consistently. Catch the patterns. Notice the tone. Pay attention to the words you use when things go wrong, because in those moments, your true internal programming reveals itself. And once you see it clearly, you gain the ability to change it, to interrupt it, and to replace it with something that aligns with the person you are trying to become. Consistency beats intensity every single time, especially when it comes to changing the way you think and talk to yourself. Most people get this wrong because they chase motivation instead of discipline. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect mood, or a sudden burst of energy to start improving their mindset. And when that motivation fades, as it always does, they fall back into old patterns. That's why intense but short-lived effort rarely creates lasting change. Real transformation comes from showing up every day, even when you don't feel like it, and especially when you don't feel like it. Your brain doesn't change because of one powerful moment. It changes because of repeated exposure. This is how habits are built, and it connects closely to the idea of habit formation. When you consistently practice positive, constructive self-talk, you are training your brain to respond differently over time. At first, it may feel unnatural or forced. That's normal because you are interrupting a pattern that has likely been running for years. But repetition is what makes the new pattern stick. Think of it like going to the gym. One intense workout doesn't change your body, but showing up regularly, even for shorter sessions, builds strength over time. The same applies to your mindset. Small daily efforts, catching a negative thought, reframing it, and continuing with action are far more powerful than occasional bursts of positivity that disappear the next day. It's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent enough that your brain starts recognizing the new pattern as normal. Another important aspect of consistency is reducing resistance. When you aim for extreme change overnight, your mind pushes back. It feels overwhelming, unrealistic, and unsustainable. But when the change is small and repeated daily, it becomes manageable. Over time, what once required effort starts becoming automatic. You don't have to force the new way of thinking anymore. It begins to happen naturally. This is where most people underestimate the power of time. They want immediate results, but mindset change is a gradual process. Each small repetition may feel insignificant on its own, but together they create a powerful shift. The key is to trust the process enough to keep going, even when you don't see instant results, and to understand that the real impact is happening beneath the surface through steady, repeated effort. Language rewires mindset in ways that are deeper than most people expect, because the words you use internally are not just descriptions of your reality, they actively shape it. Every thought you form is built out of language, and that language carries emotional weight, meaning, and direction. When you consistently use words that are negative, limiting, or absolute, you are programming your brain to interpret situations through that same lens. Saying, "I always mess things up," or "I can't handle this," doesn't just express frustration. It reinforces a pattern that your mind begins to follow automatically. This connects directly to the idea of cognitive restructuring, which is a core part of how people change their thinking patterns. The words you choose are the entry point to restructuring those thoughts. When you deliberately shift your language, you begin to interrupt automatic negativity and replace it with something more accurate and useful. Instead of saying, "I failed," you might say, "That didn't work," which removes identity from the outcome and keeps the focus on improvement. That small change in wording creates a completely different emotional response and opens the door for action. The brain responds strongly to certainty in language. Words like always, never, and impossible create rigid mental frameworks that limit flexibility. When you tell yourself something is impossible, your brain stops looking for solutions. It shuts down curiosity and effort. On the other hand, when you use language like, "I'm figuring this out," or "this is challenging but manageable," you keep your mind engaged in problem solving. The situation itself hasn't changed, but your ability to respond to it has. Another important factor is tone. It's not just what you say, but how you say it to yourself. Harsh, critical language creates stress and resistance, while constructive language creates focus and resilience. This doesn't mean avoiding accountability. It means delivering that accountability in a way that pushes you forward instead of shutting you down. You can be honest about mistakes without attacking your own identity. Over time, these small shifts in language begin to stack. The more you practice intentional wording, the more natural it becomes. Your internal dialogue starts to align with growth instead of fear, with possibility instead of limitation, and with action instead of hesitation. Accountability starts within, long before anyone else can hold you responsible for your actions or results. Most people look outward when things don't go their way. They point to circumstances, timing, other people, or lack of opportunity. While those factors can be real, relying on them as explanations removes control from your hands. Internal accountability is about shifting that focus back to yourself, not in a way that creates guilt, but in a way that creates ownership. When you take ownership of your thoughts, decisions, and actions, you gain the ability to change them. This idea is closely tied to the concept of internal locus of control. People with a strong internal locus of control believe that their choices matter, even in difficult situations. That belief drives them to act, adjust, and improve. On the other hand, when someone operates from an external perspective, they feel like life is happening to them, not because of them. That mindset leads to passivity, frustration, and repeated cycles of inaction. Your self-talk plays a major role in determining which side you fall on. When something goes wrong, the immediate narrative you create in your mind either reinforces responsibility or avoids it. Saying, "This always happens to me," places you in a position of powerlessness. Saying, "What could I have done differently?" immediately shifts you into problem-solving mode. The situation may be the same, but your response to it changes your trajectory. Internal accountability also requires honesty. Not the kind of honesty that tears you down, but the kind that forces you to face reality without excuses. It means recognizing when you didn't put in enough effort, when you avoided discomfort, or when you chose short-term ease over long-term growth. This awareness can feel uncomfortable, but it is necessary for progress. Without it, you repeat the same behaviors while expecting different results. At the same time, accountability is not about perfection. It is about responsibility. You are going to make mistakes, miss opportunities, and fall short at times. The difference lies in how you respond afterward. Do you deflect and justify, or do you reflect and adjust? When you build the habit of holding yourself accountable in a constructive way, you create a feedback loop that drives continuous improvement, making you less dependent on external validation and more focused on your own standards and actions. Patience builds transformation in a way that most people underestimate because the process of change is rarely visible in the beginning. People want immediate results, quick progress, and clear proof that what they are doing is working. When they don't see that right away, they assume nothing is happening and they give up too early. What they fail to understand is that real change, especially in mindset and self-talk, happens beneath the surface before it ever shows up in visible outcomes. This is closely connected to the concept of delayed gratification, which highlights the ability to stay committed even when results are not immediate. When you practice better self-talk for 21 days, you are not just trying to feel good in the moment. You are investing in a long-term shift in how you think, respond, and behave. That shift takes time because you are working against patterns that may have been built over years. One of the biggest challenges with patience is managing expectations. Many people start with the assumption that a few days of effort should produce noticeable change. When that expectation isn't met, frustration sets in, and they begin to doubt the process. This is where discipline becomes more important than emotion. You continue the practice not because you feel different yet, but because you understand that repetition is laying the foundation for future results. There is also a compounding effect at play. Each day of intentional self-talk adds to the previous one, even if the impact feels small. These small shifts begin to accumulate, gradually changing how you interpret situations, how you respond to challenges, and how you see yourself. At some point, the change becomes noticeable, but by then it is the result of consistent effort over time rather than a single breakthrough moment. Patience also helps reduce the pressure to be perfect. When you accept that transformation is a gradual process, you allow yourself room to make mistakes and still continue. Missing a day or falling back into negative thinking doesn't erase your progress. What matters is returning to the practice and continuing forward. This mindset keeps you engaged in the process instead of quitting at the first sign of difficulty, reinforcing the understanding that meaningful change is built step by step over time. Action follows belief, whether you are aware of it or not, because the way you see yourself directly influences what you are willing to do. If you believe you are capable, you approach challenges with effort and persistence. If you believe you are not, you hesitate, avoid, or give up early. The behavior on the surface is simply a reflection of the belief underneath. This is why changing your self-talk matters so much, because It reshapes the beliefs that drive your actions. This relationship is deeply connected to the concept of self-efficacy. When your self-efficacy is high, you are more likely to take initiative, try new things, and push through difficulty. When it is low, even simple tasks can feel overwhelming. The key point is that self-efficacy is not fixed. It develops through experience, but also through the way you interpret those experiences in your mind. Two people can go through the same situation and come out with completely different levels of confidence based on how they talk to themselves about it. Belief acts as a filter for decision-making. When an opportunity appears, your mind quickly evaluates it based on your internal narrative. If your self-talk has been consistently negative, your brain looks for reasons why it won't work or why you are not ready. This creates hesitation and often leads to inaction. On the other hand, when your internal dialogue supports growth, your brain looks for ways to engage, learn, and adapt. The opportunity is the same, but your response is completely different. There is also a feedback loop between belief and action. Small actions build evidence, and that evidence strengthens belief. For example, when you tell yourself, "I can handle this," and then take even a small step forward, you create proof that supports that statement. Over time, these small pieces of evidence stack up, making the belief feel more real and more stable. This is how confidence is built, not from thinking alone, but from thinking followed by action. At the same time, without action, belief remains fragile. You can repeat positive statements to yourself, but if they are not supported by behavior, they don't fully take root. That is why the combination of intentional self-talk and consistent action is so powerful. One shapes the mindset, and the other reinforces it, creating a cycle where belief drives action and action strengthens belief over time. What this all comes down to is simple, but not easy. For the next 21 days, you are not just changing words, you are changing the way you see yourself, the way you respond to challenges, and the way you show up in your own life. Your self-talk is not background noise. It is the foundation of your identity, your habits, your patience, your accountability, and ultimately your actions. If you stay consistent, even when it feels small, if you stay aware, even when it's uncomfortable, if you stay patient, even when you don't see results, you begin to take control of the one thing that drives everything else, your mind, and once that shifts, everything else starts to follow. Because when you speak to yourself with intention, you think with clarity. When you think with clarity, you act with purpose. And when you act with purpose, you build a version of yourself that no longer needs motivation to keep going. This is not about being perfect for 21 days. It's about proving to yourself that change is possible, that your thoughts are not fixed, and that you are not stuck with the voice you've been given. You can train it, shape it, and use it. So don't treat this like a challenge you try once and forget. Treat it like a standard you're building. Because at the end of these 21 days, the real win won't be what you achieved on the outside. It will be who you became on the inside.